The first time I saw Lucas cry, I was crouched behind my laptop, pretending to debug code while secretly scrolling through his browser history. It was 2 a.m., the Brooklyn apartment creaking under the weight of a humid August night, and his muffled sobs drifted from his bedroom like a ghost I wasn't supposed to notice. I froze, my finger hovering over the trackpad. His search for how to tell if you're in love with your roommate glaring back at me from the screen. I wasn't supposed to know. Hell, I wasn't supposed to care. But Lucas Carter, 25, blonde, perpetually nervous, with eyes like a stormy Pacific coast, had been my roommate for 6 months, and I'd been quietly unraveling his secrets ever since I accidentally stumbled across his unpassworded laptop. It started innocently. I needed to borrow his charger, clicked around, and found his browser open. One tab led to another, and soon I was piecing together a mosaic of his fears, dreams, and questions he was too shy to ask out loud. Am I gay? How to come out to your best friend? Why do I feel like this around him? Each search was a breadcrumb, and I, Elliot Ruiz, 24, coder by day and accidental spy by night, followed them all. Our apartment on Flatbush Avenue was a Craigslist miracle. Exposed brick, creaky hardwood floors, and a view of bodega neon signs that flickered like a heartbeat. Lucas and I met through a mutual friend, Tara, who swore we'd get along because we were both artsy weirdos. I'm a lanky Puerto Rican guy with a penchant for vintage band tees and too much coffee. Lucas is a graphic designer who collects vinyl records and blushes when he talks about his feelings. We clicked instantly, splitting chores and late-night pizza like we'd known each other forever. But somewhere between our debates over Radiohead's best album and his habit of leaving half-finished sketches on the coffee table, I started noticing the way his laugh made my chest tighten. That night, as his sobs grew quieter, I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my heart pounding. I wasn't a mind reader, but his searches painted a picture clearer than any confession. Lucas was falling for me, and he was terrified. I should have stopped there, logged out, minded my own business. But I didn't. Instead, I kept digging, telling myself it was harmless curiosity. Each search felt like a stolen glance, a way to know him without crossing the line. But the line was blurring, and I was already halfway over it. The next morning, Lucas emerged from his room, eyes red but smiling like nothing had happened. "Coffee?" he asked, holding up the pot. His voice was soft, like he was afraid of breaking the air between us. "Sure," I said, forcing a grin. I watched him pour, his hands steady now, and wondered how someone so open could hide so much. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep." He froze, just for a second, then laughed it off. "Yeah, just late night designing. Deadlines, you know?" I nodded, but my mind was on his 3 a.m. search. How to stop overthinking your feelings. I wanted to say something, to ask him outright, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I sipped my coffee and let the silence stretch, heavy with everything we weren't saying. Over the next few weeks, the apartment became a stage for our unspoken drama. Lucas started acting weird. He'd linger when we watched movies, his knee brushing mine on the couch. He'd ask random questions. "Do you ever think about, really knowing someone?" And then blush and change the subject. I played along, answering vaguely, all while checking his browser history like it was my personal diary. Signs he likes you back. How to flirt without being obvious. Each search was a jolt, a confirmation that the tension wasn't just in my head. But I wasn't ready to admit I felt it too. Not yet. One night, we were sprawled on the living room floor, vinyl spinning low, a bottle of cheap wine between us. Lucas was tipsy, his cheeks flushed, his usual shyness softened. "Elliot," he said, staring at the ceiling, "do you ever feel like someone just gets you? Like they know what you're thinking before you say it?" My heart skipped. I could have told him the truth right then, that I'd been reading his digital footprints, that I knew he was wrestling with feelings he couldn't name. Instead, I leaned closer, our shoulders almost touching, and said, "Yeah, sometimes I think I know you better than you know yourself." He turned to me, eyes wide, and for a moment, I thought he'd call me out. But he just smiled, soft and sad, and said, "You're probably right." That was the moment I realized I was in trouble. Not because I'd invaded his privacy, though yeah, that was bad, but because I was falling for him too. And I had no idea how to confess that without admitting how I'd gotten so close to his heart in the first place. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Lucas's searches grew more desperate. How to tell if he's straight? Can you love someone who doesn't love you back? And I felt like a thief, stealing pieces of his soul while pretending everything was normal. I tried to pull back, to stop checking his laptop, but it was like an addiction. Every time I saw him hesitate, every time his eyes lingered on me a second too long, I'd sneak a glance at his history to confirm what I already knew. He was spiraling, and I was letting it happen. One rainy afternoon, I came home to find Lucas sketching at the kitchen table, his laptop open beside him. He didn't hear me come in, and I caught a glimpse of his screen. How to move on from a crush. My stomach twisted. I should have walked away, but instead, I cleared my throat and said, "New project." He jumped, slamming the laptop shut. Yeah, just doodling." His voice was high, panicked, and I hated myself for putting him on edge. "Looks intense," I said, nodding at the sketch. A chaotic swirl of lines that screamed frustration. "You okay, man?" He looked at me, his blue eyes searching mine, and for a second, I thought he'd spill everything. But he just shrugged and said, "Yeah, just overthinking." I wanted to shake him, to tell him I knew, to make him say it out loud. But I was a coward, hiding behind his secrets instead of facing my own. So I grabbed a beer from the fridge and changed the subject, talking about some dumb coding bug I'd fixed at work. He laughed, but it was hollow, and I could feel the distance growing between us. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep invading his privacy. It was wrong, and it was tearing me apart. But I also couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel something. So I started dropping hints, testing the waters. I'd touch his arm when we talked, let my gaze linger, mirror the subtle flirtations I'd read about in his searches. He noticed. I could tell by the way his breath hitched, the way he'd blush and look away. But he never made a move, and I was too scared to push it further. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday, and we'd gone to a bar in Williamsburg with Tara and some friends. Lucas was quieter than usual, nursing his drink while the rest of us laughed over stupid stories. I kept catching him staring at me, his expression unreadable. On the walk home, just the two of us, the city buzzing around us, he finally spoke. "Elliot," he said, stopping under a streetlight, "do you ever feel like you're keeping a secret from everyone? Like, even from yourself?" I stopped too, my heart pounding. The air was thick with the smell of rain and pizza from a nearby shop, and his face was half-lit, vulnerable. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "All the time." He stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. I think I'm figuring something out, about myself, but I'm scared it's gonna ruin everything." I wanted to tell him it wouldn't, that I knew that I felt it too. But before I could, he turned and started walking again, leaving me standing there, my confession stuck in my throat. Back at the apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. I knew what he was trying to say, but he wasn't ready, and I wasn't sure I was either. So I did what I always did, I opened his laptop. His latest search was a gut punch. How to tell your roommate you're in love with him. I closed the laptop and sat there, my hands shaking. I couldn't keep doing this. I had to stop, had to come clean, had to face him. But the thought of admitting I'd been spying on him, of risking our friendship, our home, was paralyzing. So I made a plan. I'd give him space, let him come to me when he was ready, and I'd stop looking at his browser history. For good. Quitting Lucas's browser history was harder than quitting coffee. For days, I avoided his laptop, but the temptation was always there, humming like a siren song. I threw myself into work, coding late into the night, trying to drown out the questions piling up in my head. Was he going to confess? Was he pulling away? Did he know I knew? Lucas, meanwhile, was acting like nothing had happened, all smiles and small talk. But I could see the strain in his eyes, the way he'd pause before answering me. One evening, I came home to find him cooking his stress relief ritual. The apartment smelled like garlic and basil, and he was chopping vegetables with a focus that bordered on manic. "Spaghetti tonight," he said, not looking up. "You in?" "Always," I said, leaning against the counter. I watched him work, the way his hands moved with precision, the way his brow furrowed when he was deep in thought. I wanted to ask him about the bar, about his secret, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a knife and started chopping onions beside him, our elbows brushing in the small kitchen. "You're quiet tonight," he said after a while, glancing at me. "So are you?" I shot back, trying to keep it light, but my heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid. He laughed, but it was nervous. "Yeah, I guess I've got a lot on my mind. Want to talk about it?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. He froze, the knife hovering over a tomato. For a second, I thought he'd say it, spill everything right there in the kitchen. But then he shook his head and said, "Nah, it's just work stuff." I nodded, but I was screaming inside. I wanted to grab him, to tell him I knew about his searches, about his feelings, about the way my own heart was betraying me. But I didn't. I just kept chopping, the silence louder than ever. The next day, I broke my promise. I couldn't help it. His laptop was open on the couch and he was in the shower. I told myself it was just one last look, just to see if he was okay. His latest search was a knife to the chest. How to move out without hurting your roommate. I sat there, stunned, as the shower shut off and his footsteps echoed down the hall. I closed the laptop just as he walked in, towel around his waist, hair dripping. "You good?" he asked, frowning at my expression. "Yeah," I lied, my voice tight. "Just tired." He didn't buy it, but he didn't push. That night, we watched a movie, some dumb comedy neither of us laughed at. He sat closer than usual, his shoulder against mine, and I could feel the heat of him, the tension radiating off him. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but I was paralyzed by guilt. I'd been playing God with his secrets, and now he was thinking about leaving. The next morning, I woke up to a note on the fridge. "Gone to Tara's. Back later. L." My stomach dropped. Tara was his confidant, the one person he'd tell if he was planning to move out. I spent the day pacing, imagining him packing his bags, leaving without a word. When he finally came home, I was a wreck, sitting on the couch with my laptop, pretending to work. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "You okay? You look off." I couldn't take it anymore. "Are you moving out?" I blurted, my voice sharper than I meant. He blinked, caught off guard. "What? No. Why would you think that?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. You've been weird lately. I thought maybe you were done with this place." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he sat down next to me, closer than he needed to be. "I'm not going anywhere, Elliot," he said softly. "Not unless you want me to." My heart stopped. I wanted to tell him everything, about his browser history, about my feelings, about the mess I'd made. But all I could manage was, "I don't want you to." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. "Good," he said, "because I like it here. With you." The air in the apartment shifted after that night. Lucas stopped acting like he was walking on eggshells, and I stopped checking his laptop. But the tension between us didn't disappear. It just changed, like a song switching keys. We were dancing around something bigger now, something neither of us was brave enough to name. One crisp October evening, we went to a rooftop party at Tara's place in Bushwick. The city skyline sparkled below, and the air was sharp with autumn chill. Lucas was in his element, laughing with friends, his blonde hair catching the string lights. I watched him from across the roof, my heart doing that stupid flip it always did when he smiled. Tara caught me staring and nudged me, smirking. "You're not subtle, Ruiz," she said. "Shut up," I muttered, but I couldn't hide my grin. She leaned closer, her voice low. "He talks about you, all the time. He's just scared." I wanted to ask her what he'd said, but before I could, Lucas waved me over. "Elliot, come on. You're missing the view." I joined him at the edge of the roof, the city sprawling beneath us. He handed me a beer, his fingers brushing mine, and I felt that familiar jolt. "It's beautiful, right?" he said, staring out at the lights. "Yeah," I said, but I was looking at him. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his eyes bright with something I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I thought about telling him everything. About his searches, about my feelings, about how I'd known for months. But then he turned to me, his expression soft, and said, "I'm glad you're here, Elliot. Like, really glad." My throat tightened. "Me too," I managed. We stood there, the city humming below, and I felt the weight of all the secrets I'd been carrying. I couldn't keep lying to him, not if I wanted this, whatever it was, to be real. So I made a decision. I'd tell him. Not tonight, not with the music and the crowd, but soon. I come clean, no matter how much it scared me. The next week was a blur of stolen glances and near confessions. Lucas started leaving his sketches around the apartment, little drawings of us. 2 figures on a couch, 2 hands brushing over a coffee mug. I didn't know if he meant for me to see them, but they felt like messages, like he was trying to say something without words. I wanted to reciprocate, to show him I felt it too, but I didn't know how. I wasn't an artist like him. I was just a coder who'd gotten in too deep. Then came the night of the blackout. A storm rolled through Brooklyn, knocking out the power, and our apartment was plunged into darkness. Lucas lit candles, their flickering light casting shadows on the walls. We sat on the living room floor, wrapped in blankets, passing a bottle of whiskey back and forth. The air was thick with the smell of wax and rain, and for once, there was no laptop to hide behind. "Elliot," Lucas said, his voice low, "can I ask you something?" My heart pounded. "Anything." He hesitated, staring into the candlelight. "Do you ever feel like you're not who you thought you were? Like you're figuring yourself out, but it's scary as hell?" I nodded, my chest tight. "Yeah, more than you know." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I think I'm in love with someone, and I don't know how to tell them." The world stopped. Could have lied, played dumb, kept up the charade. But I was tired of hiding. So I took a breath and said, "I know Lucas. I've known for a while." His eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything. But then he laughed, a shaky, nervous sound. How? How do you always know what I'm thinking?" I swallowed hard, my guilt rising like bile. "I don't. I pay attention." He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "And what do you see?" I could have told him the truth right then, about his browser history, about my betrayal. But instead, I reached out, my hand trembling, and brushed my fingers against his. "I see you," I said, "and I'm in love with you too." The moment the words left my mouth, the air in the apartment seemed to shift, like the storm outside had paused to listen. Lucas stared at me, his eyes wide, the candlelight flickering across his face. For a second, I thought he'd pull away, that I'd misread everything. But then he leaned forward, closing the gap between us, and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was testing the waters. But then it deepened, all the months of tension and unspoken words pouring out. My hands found his face, his hair, and I could feel his heart racing under my touch. When we finally pulled back, breathless, he laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that made my chest ache. "How long?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "How long have you known?" I froze. This was it, the moment I had to come clean. I took a deep breath, my hands still on his shoulders, and said, "Lucas, I need to tell you something, and you might hate me for it." His smile faded, replaced by a wary look. "What?" I've been looking at your browser history," I said, the words tumbling out. "For months. That's how I knew. About your feelings, about everything. I didn't mean to. It started as an accident, but then I couldn't stop. I'm so sorry." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas pulled back, his expression unreadable. "You. What?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been spying on me?" "I know it's messed up," I said, my voice cracking. "I was curious, and then I got in too deep. I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. I didn't want to lose you." He stood up, pacing the room, the candlelight casting long shadows. "So all this time, you knew? Every time I was freaking out, every time I was trying to figure myself out, you knew?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I didn't know how to stop without telling you, and I didn't know how to tell you without ruining everything." He stopped pacing, his hands in his hair. "Do you know how hard it was for me? To figure out who I am, to admit I was falling for you, and you were just reading it like some kind of script." "I wasn't just reading it," I said, standing up. "I was falling for you too. That's why I kept looking, because I wanted to know you, to understand you. I was too scared to ask you outright." He shook his head, his eyes shining with tears. "You should have asked, Elliot. You should have trusted me." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I messed up. But I love you, Lucas. That's real. That's not something I found in your browser history." He looked at me, his expression softening but still guarded. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to think." I nodded, my heart sinking. "Okay, whatever you need." He grabbed a candle and disappeared into his room, leaving me alone in the dark. The storm raged outside, and I sat there, wondering if I'd just lost the best thing in my life. The next few days were agony. Lucas was polite but distant, spending most of his time at Tara's or locked in his room. I gave him space, hating myself for what I'd done. I threw myself into work, into coding, into anything to keep my mind off the possibility that he'd move out, that I'd ruined us before we even had a chance. Then, one morning, I woke up to find a sketch on the coffee table. It was us. Two figures sitting on the floor, surrounded by candles, their hands intertwined. Underneath, in Lucas's neat handwriting, was a single sentence. "I'm still figuring this out, but I don't want to lose you either." I found him in the kitchen making coffee, and for the first time in days he smiled at me. "You saw the sketch?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Lucas, He held up a hand. "I'm still mad," he said. "What you did was wrong. But I get it. You were scared too. And I don't want to throw this away just because we're both idiots." I laughed, relief flooding through me. "So what now?" He stepped closer, his eyes soft. "Now we talk. For real. No secrets, no spying. Just us. And so we did. We talked about his fears, his journey, his realization that he was gay. I told him about my own confusion, my guilt, my hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and for the first time I felt like we were on the same page. Months later, we're still here, in our creaky Brooklyn apartment, navigating this new thing between us. It's messy and scary and beautiful, like all the best things are. Lucas's laptop is password protected now, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to read his mind anymore. I'm learning to read his heart instead.